Learning from every interaction. Now, what does that mean? Lovely. Well, I mean, this first off is a new endeavor for me. I guess in a way, got the stream vibe going on here, but I've had a yearning, like Costanza. Do you ever yearn? Um, to talk about interaction with others and working with others and the influence of ourselves and our influence on others. And over my career in customer service, I've picked up a lot of things that I just want to share. Um, and that's kind of what this is. And I think I'll just like break it down into episodes. And episode number one is learning from every interaction. And part of the fun of working with individuals, in my opinion, on a consistent basis is the opportunity to learn from every interaction, good or bad, big and small. And I think that's so cool. And I think a lot of the desire to do this in the first place is rooted in wanting to be accepted at a deeper level. And it's also a deep awareness of one's own behaviors. And in turn, you kind of become aware of the behaviors of others. And I feel like it's a prerequisite to be aware of your own attitudes and actions, to be interested in those of others because they act as like a reflection of sorts, a mirror that you can sort of reflect yourself onto. And I was always, and still to this day, comparing others to what I was doing, which can be very useful, but it can also be pathological if it's not acknowledged fully. And what Carl Jung would call the shadow, that which is lurking in the unconscious. But it was kind of weird because it always felt like a one-sided comparison, always in favor of the other, as in very little of what I did felt good enough or correct. And again, going back to the interest in others, for a long time, I've been very interested in what people do and why they do it and why I do what I do. And early on, though, like it didn't feel this way. It was bizarre because it just felt out of control. Like I couldn't actually control me doing that. Like whether it was critiquing myself or others or evaluating kind of everything that I was doing or others were doing relative to mine. Whereas as time goes on, I've found that as this awareness grew, I was able to actually see it happening and then take a closer look and really have more control over it. And it's not like I'll never, and I don't think people in general that have those tendencies will ever be able to get rid of it or necessarily would want to ever get rid of that tendency to judge or critique. But I think if, again, as Carl Jung would say, if we're not aware of our shadow, we sort of lose control of it, and it will come out in our behaviors and the things we say and do and the outcomes that are created in ways that we maybe think we're influencing, but that we aren't, or we kind of lose control of them, and they may come out in ways that we don't necessarily want them to. Um, I love this quote also by Jung. All will is a demonstration of power over fate, i.e., the exclusion of chance. And that's so accurate. I remember early on in my career, This came through in a lot of study, a lot of work, a lot of activity, like this super deep desire to get better, which is great. But it created just an insane amount of anxiety and uncertainty. Like nothing I was doing was ever good enough or enough to begin with. Like good or bad, it just never felt enough. And that is difficult to deal with at times. But I also think that comes with the territory. If you're going to have that level of awareness of what you're doing and what others are doing, that awareness is going to just naturally create more anxiety, right? Just because you're getting more information, presumably you're getting better at doing the things you're doing, which will create larger challenges and things like that, and in turn more anxiety, more uncertainty, things like that. And then over time, as this awareness grew, at least for me, I kind of took a step back. It was like, man, you're never going to have full control over a situation. And earlier on, too, in my career, I always thought that interactions and outcomes depended on what I do and think solely. And they do influence a situation to a degree, of course. But there's a lot more to the equation, and it wasn't in a selfish way. It wasn't like, oh, I'm everything. I have sole influence on the situation, whatever. No, it was out of a deep insecurity. It was out of a fear of not being sufficient or good enough, or that I wasn't going to get the outcome that, I mean, heck, even now, but at that time, it's like that someone else was setting upon me, right? It's not necessarily the outcome that I wanted, but it was just whatever society put on me or my boss or whatever outcome that was demanded of me. So I was like, as time goes on, and I don't know exactly why that awareness came, like obviously through study and self-awareness, but it's like you kind of just see it in the field through various experiences that you have a degree of control, but you don't have full control. And even if you prepare in every way that you possibly can, something will go wrong, or someone will behave in an odd or unpredictable way, and it'll just kind of throw everything out the window. And then I kind of found if I could pair that with actual self-knowledge, then you just like, oh yeah, this is the best. Now you have a tremendous amount of weaponry, an arsenal of things that you can take out into whatever field you're in, customer service, if you're working with people. And I kind of embrace the fact that I don't have full control, and I don't want it either, because I mean, then it robs others of their level of influence and what they want and what they need. But and it's certainly something you can get better at. Your presence, the influence that you impart on others. Another huge one is your ability to communicate, and that's something that I'll discuss in other episodes. But these things come together to create outcomes, and then hopefully you can have outcomes that are mutually beneficial. And it's kind of crazy now too, because I avoided conflict earlier in my career, and it was never physical conflict. I think it's pretty rare that you're actually going to come into contact on the job, or if you're in customer service or whatever the function where you have to actually interact with people a lot. I think it's rare that it'll actually come to fighting or physical. But that to me is sort of like, that's a different realm. If it gets to that, that's it. You just throw down and get at it. The work kind of isn't really the focus at that point. But the other side of it, I came, and to this day now, I love conflict. I love tough situations, whether it's, angry customers or problems and dealing with the problems, or even quirky people or challenging people to deal with. I love those types of things. And I did not early in my career. Um, and that ties back to loving and learning from every interaction. I avoided those types of conflicts early on, whereas now I see them as very valuable opportunities to pick something up from what I'm doing, or maybe I made a mistake, or maybe someone else made a mistake that I have to kind of take responsibility for, because that's what happens. Someone downstream might have made an error, and if you're in account management or something, you often are the one that has to take the bullets for that mistake. And that is a great skill to develop. Developing that thick skin, being able to not only stand up for the people that work with you, if justified, but then to deal with the situation in a great way and then move on and learn from that communication. So now, as I said, I love challenging situations when it comes to working with others. And I think there are a couple important things to get to that point that I developed through experience and then self-exploration and exploring the shadow, in Jung's terms. And other things like the ability to read social cues and what other people are telling you in their body language and how they're speaking or behaving. Those are all incredibly useful things, and I also love studying those things. But something that's even deeper is the level of empathy. And I believe empathy as a word is fairly new. But an early mentor of mine, early in my career, told me that my high degree of empathy would be my greatest asset. And it has been, and it will continue to be. But what he didn't tell me is that it would also be my greatest burden. Because a lot of, or with that ability to connect on such a deep level with others, means that you also bear their burdens. In a way, you kind of take them on to yourself, which is incredibly useful in customer service roles, in roles that, whether, hospitality, or you have to take care of people, or you have to work with people, you have to help them. But you do take that burden onto yourself, and it's tough. It can be very difficult and weighs on you quite a bit in order to do that. So I wish that he kind of told me that too. But, I did realize that. And that also comes through awareness. And some examples of that are like, how did I react in that situation with that person at that time? Did what I say come through as a result of ego? Did I say that because I didn't really want to admit that I didn't know the answer to what they were asking me, so I made something up? Or did I make a mistake that resulted in a failed delivery or something that inconvenienced the customer? But then I tried to blame it on someone else, or maybe blame it on them or something. And those things are super detrimental, man. Like, I'll get to that in another episode. But going back to the empathy side of things, and a couple things that are key, try and understand how those things manifest in your own life. How is your ability to connect with others? Do you feel their burdens? Do you feel kind of the weight of tough decisions? Or, for me personally, a lot of that kind of thing comes through music, and the way it can move me, or watching movies or something where you kind of just feel what people are going through. Another thing that I have such a hard time with is like seeing comedians bomb, or people that like get Borat level humiliated. I have such a hard time with those things. So being aware and trying to understand how those things manifest in the way you communicate is super, super useful. So, kind of wrapping this up into a few points, it's like number one, acknowledge your level of awareness of your own thoughts, actions, and behaviors. Like, how often does this translate to criticisms of yourself or others? And interactions include with yourself, not just others. How do you talk to yourself? Are you very harsh with yourself? And, do you hold yourself to very high standards? Are you unforgiving? Are you a tyrant in the way that you try to control what level of skill you develop, or how you react when you make mistakes? Understand those things, because if you don't, then they're going to come out in your behaviors and they'll reflect on others. Jung talks a lot about that in the book's right here. The undiscovered, the undiscovered self. If you don't acknowledge it within yourself, then you'll just see it in others. And it will happen in ways that you probably won't like, and the other person or persons won't like either, whether it's snapping at them or saying things you don't mean, and things like that. And then use this awareness as it develops to just take a step back and first understand, why are you so critical? And then use it for good, not evil. Like, I know within myself, I am often very critical of others in certain ways. Like, not with everything, more with, like, I don't know, I guess behavior and etiquette and respect and the treatment of others. But I'm very rarely vocal about it unless it's called for, when standing up for someone or that kind of thing. But I'm pretty high in agreeableness when it comes to the personality aspects. So I've never been too confrontational in that respect. So I understand that. I'm like, okay, I often judge others harshly. But that's because I judge myself even more harshly. And now that I know that, now that I take a step back, I can see it when it's happening and then try to understand it the best I can, and then learn something from it, and then glean whatever is useful from it. And then just use it to facilitate an inner empathy, an empathy with yourself, feeling for yourself, and having a little bit of, not slack, but the ability to just work with yourself and not be an absolute tyrant. To connect with yourself, but then with others. And then over time, as you interact more and more, it will become natural to connect with others, and even in the smallest situations. And then a second point, I would say, you'll only ever have so much influence. You can certainly get better overall, but with a realization that we are limited in our ability, in our knowledge. We'll never know enough. We will never have complete control. We'll never be able to create every single outcome that we want. We have to let others shine and work with them and compromise and build mutually beneficial outcomes. With that, it stops becoming about how I can completely create an outcome on my own, and more about how I can work with others to create a mutually beneficial outcome. And that's extremely important if you're in roles that involve others, or especially a lot of others, like if you're in a corporation, or if you're in hospitality, if you're in hotels or wherever, and obviously that the ability to create outcomes on your own is extremely valuable too. But understanding that we need each other, we need to work together is a huge benefit as well. And then third, it's see any level of interaction, good or bad, as a way to learn about yourself and others. And making mistakes is going to happen. That's unavoidable. But learning from them, that's an absolute must. Like, that's what we want. It's unacceptable to not learn from those mistakes. And I touched on it a bit, but I mentioned that I enjoy confrontation and I enjoy dealing with problems and conflict, but I don't enjoy creating them. I will never intentionally create issues or scenarios where people are hurt, or not like physically hurt, but emotionally, or any situations that would benefit me to the loss of someone else. But they're going to happen because a lot of that is out of your control as well. So again, I love dealing with conflict and tough situations and tough people especially. I find dealing with very difficult people fascinating. So I embrace them, and it didn't happen right away. It took a long time to be able to get there. And to touch a little bit more on that and how to, I think, get there, first, it's kind of having this deep-seated anchor within yourself. Like for me, it's an anchor of value. I think within my career and in life in general, I have innate value in what I'm able to contribute. And no one will ever take that away. Like, no one can take that away, especially not some corporate customer or some person off the street, or someone that might walk in and take their horrible day out on me or whoever, if they're working in a more retail environment. So I say to myself, I have value in what I contribute, and no one that I could potentially interact with will ever take that away. And the second is being able to take responsibility for that. Because you can kind of think of it as, oh yeah, I have value, so no matter what I do, doesn't matter, whatever outcomes, good or bad, doesn't matter. But you have to take responsibility for the outcome. If something happens, if you make a mistake, or if you create conflict, you have to take responsibility for that. And I never understood this. I mean, I guess I understand why people dodge responsibility, but I'm like, when you embrace it and accept it, it makes you not want to do it again, because it sucks. It really sucks to do it. And again, that's why I think a lot of people don't and avoid it. But by doing that, by embracing it, by being honest and fully accepting that responsibility, you'll learn and you won't make that mistake again. It's super unlikely you won't make it, because it just sucks so much that you want to avoid it. So anyway, I don't really understand why folks dodge so much of that, because by not dodging it, you'll get better at not making those mistakes in the first place. And you'll get better at taking responsibility at the smallest levels. So then these poor outcomes don't build and build and build until something catastrophic happens. No, you address them. You acknowledge them when they're small, and you take care of them. So those two things I think I developed over time through that self-awareness. And I'll just mention one last thing. Dostoevsky, his book, The Brothers Karamazov, an incredible book, by the way, and I would highly suggest it. I highly recommend it to anyone. It's a dense book. It's long, as Dostoevsky's books are, and they're very dense and can be difficult to follow. But my goodness, like this book, it was amazing. But anyway, one of the themes in it is no matter what you do, you are contributing. Whether that outcome or no, whether whatever that outcome is, whether it's good or bad, you're contributing. And no matter your status or who you are, you do contribute to the fabric of what's going on, of life. And I know for me personally, that idea really helped me embrace what I was doing and my lot in life, and where I was with my career and that kind of thing. Like, I'm by no means famous. I'm not well known. And a lot of that kind of thing, you see these people that are, and you're like, oh, man, am I less than, or what's going on? But that idea was so profound for me. It's just, and he weaves this concept in the book brilliantly too, by the way the characters interact, and even the smallest things that they do create these situations. And that for me was amazing, because I used it in that how I interact and what I do, even on the smallest level every day, matters. And that made me feel really good, because I wanted to hold myself to a higher standard. I wanted to use that for good. It made me really want to contribute in a positive way. And you can do that in every interaction. And that includes with yourself, understanding how you interact with yourself, because that is huge too. But then, of course, interact with others. And that's a lot of where the fun comes, I think, in how you interact with people. And it's not easy. It's very difficult to pick these things up and to be fully present in your interactions with people, especially with friends. And that's not to say like doing this all the time. There's no way. It's exhausting, and there's benefit in just being in the world too. So I've found that I pick spots where I'm able to apply some of these concepts, and I find the deeper the philosophies go, and the more you kind of implement them or use them in the very way you conduct yourself, in an honorable, in a forthright way, and grounded in truth, then you don't really have to think much beyond that. Because if you just tell yourself, well, I'm going to just tell the truth all the time. I might have to think about how I express that truth, and that's okay. But I'm going to be honest. Then you don't have to think about it too much. You just kind of do it. And again, these things aren't easy, but I found they've benefited me so much in my work and in my career. And if you are in a type of career, whether even if it's at just some retail place or a fast food joint or wherever it is, or it's part of your career, you can use these types of things to not only make the work more interesting, but to build your character. And that's what's super fun about it for me. So I think that's all I have to say about that. This is the first episode. Learn from every interaction. Value Quanta is the name of what I'm doing. Expatiate is the word of the day, or word of the video, or word of the whatever. Forget where I picked this one up, but I read a lot, and I see a lot of words that I don't know. So whenever I see a word that I don't know, I write it down, or I put it in my phone or whatever, and then I look it up. So time to time, actually probably all the time, there will be a word below me there for you to hopefully learn from. And then a quote these kinds of things I like to embrace. And then, I'll generally have wine with me or something along those lines because I love wine. I love tasting it. I love learning about it. But anyway, that's it for this episode, and I'll see you guys later.